Imagine for a second that you're living in this really tight-knit community and you notice a sudden, just inexplicable spike in your neighbor's wealth.
Like overnight riches.
Right, overnight riches.
Mm.
Now, in most modern Western contexts, you'd probably assume they, I don't know, made a shrewd investment or landed a massive promotion.
Or maybe they just inherited some money.
Yeah, exactly. You might feel a little pang of jealousy, sure, but you generally view it as the result of good business, or just plain old good luck.
Right.
But what if your community viewed that sudden, unshared wealth not as a success, but as a literal, life-draining crime? A world where, extreme capitalist accumulation isn't just unfair, but it's actually seen as a horrifying act of occult violence.
Where human lives are literally secretly consumed to generate that wealth.
Yes, it's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are so thrilled to have you listening in today because we have a really profound journey ahead of us.
We really do.
We are taking a magnifying glass to this incredibly brilliant, heavily layered book by Elias Kifon-Bamba. It's called African Witchcraft and Otherness, a philosophical and theological critique of intersubjective relations.
It is a phenomenal piece of work.
It really is. And our mission today is to completely and hopefully permanently dismantle those preconceived, Hollywood-style pop culture notions you might have when you hear the word witchcraft.
Because it's so much deeper than that.
Exactly. We're going to explore how the Wimbum people of Cameroon use the language and concepts of occult power to debate profound moral questions, how they navigate the terrifying anxieties of modern capitalism.
And ultimately how they define the very boundaries of what it means to be human.
Now, if you're sitting there wondering why you specifically should invest your time into understanding a cultural framework from the Dongamanton Plateau in Cameroon.
Which is an incredibly specific region.
Oh, right. Well, consider this. If you have ever felt completely overwhelmed by how power and resources are hoarded in modern society, or if you've ever questioned how communities enforce ethical boundaries when, formal laws fall short, this is for you.
Oh, absolutely. The insights we are unpacking today will be shockingly relevant to you.
Because we're looking at a highly complex, dynamic system of thought that tackles those exact universal struggles.
It just happens to do so through a vocabulary that the West has crudely and often quite arrogantly, I would say, translated as witchcraft.
Arrogantly is the perfect word for it. The sheer blend of material we're working with today is staggering. We are weaving together deep in the weeds African anthropology as the societal shockwaves of post-colonial capitalism and high-level European philosophy.
Specifically the radical ethics of Emmanuel Levinas, which is going to be fascinating to get into.
It's going to blow your mind. So let's start by grounding ourselves in the physical and social landscape here. We're talking about the Wimbum people.
Right, so historically, this is a predominantly agricultural society living in fairly structured towns.
And we are dealing with patrilineal exogamous families, but it is crucial to understand that this is not just some casual gathering of rural farmers, right?
Oh, no. The societal structure is rigid, it's complex, and highly, highly organized.
Yeah. Highly organized is almost an understatement. So at the absolute center of the Wimbum town, you find the Inkfu.
Or as the title is more widely recognized across the broader grassfields region of Cameroon, the Fawn.
The Fawn, right. This is the paramount town chief. He is the head of the royal family, basically the ultimate traditional authority.
He is. But if you look at the day-to-day lived reality of the Wimbum people, the center of gravity isn't actually the Fawn's palace.
Really?
Yeah. The real engine of daily social and economic life is the extended family system. And those extended families are governed by a figure known as the Fae.
The Fae, often referred to as the quarterhead, right?
Yeah.
Because reading through Bongba's meticulous account, the sheer weight of responsibility placed on the shoulders of the Fae is just astonishing. This is clearly not some ceremonial title you get just for being the oldest guy in the room.
Far from it. I mean, the Fae is the central node of economic distribution for the entire extended family network.
Wow.
Imagine having the authority to decide where your relatives will build their homes, which plots of land they're allowed to cultivate for crops, and how the entire agricultural yield is managed.
That is a massive amount of control.
It is. And furthermore, the Fae manages the collective wealth of the family to handle major social transactions, things like paying bride wealth.
Right, so if a young man in the family wants to marry, he can't just go do it on his own.
No, absolutely not. The Fae has to allocate the resources to make that marriage socially and legally recognized.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because when I was reviewing the Knights on the Fae's duties, my modern Western brain immediately started making comparisons.
Naturally. Yeah.
So is the Fae basically acting as a combination of, like, a corporate CEO managing assets, a Supreme Court justice mediating internal family disputes, and a high priest managing the spiritual health of the lineage?
That is a very apt analogy.
Because if so, that sounds like an incredibly dangerous concentration of power in a single human being.
Well, your analogy touches on the functional roles perfectly, but we have to be extremely careful here. We can't just map our Western anxieties about authoritarianism directly onto the Wimbum system.
Okay, fair point. How does it actually work then?
The power of the Fae is immense, sure, but it is not an absolute dictatorship. The Fae operates within this dense web of advisors, elders, and the heads of individual households within that extended family.
Ah, so there are checks and balances.
Exactly. The text provides a great illustrative example with Fain Gavanti of New Tumba. He doesn't just dictate policy from on high. He works in constant consultation with the heads of 5 distinct households beneath him.
To reach a consensus.
Right. The power is deeply tied to seniority, proven wisdom, reputation, and, most importantly, the overarching goal of maintaining communal harmony. If a Fair acts selfishly, he completely loses his legitimacy.
Which brings us to a fundamental concept that is going to act as the foundation for everything else we talk about today. For you listening, if you want to understand the Wimbum worldview, you have to completely erase the line between the secular and the sacred.
Yes, that is absolutely vital.
That neat little division we have in the West, it simply does not exist here.
We are so conditioned to compartmentalize our lives,
Yeah.
You go to the office or the factory from 9 to 5, and that's your secular economic life.
Right, and then you go to a church, a mosque, or a synagogue on the weekend, and that is your sacred religious life.
Exactly. But for the Wimbum, religion, which encompasses rituals, divinations, and honoring the ancestors and daily survival, they are fused into a single, indivisible cultural system.
So every economic action has a spiritual dimension.
And every spiritual ritual has a practical economic purpose. They are 2 sides of the exact same coin.
The sources outline several specific rituals that perfectly capture this fusion, like the Tangsi. Can we walk through the mechanics of the Tangsi? Because it's not just a quick prayer before dinner.
Oh no, it is a profound physical and social event. The Tangsi is a foundational religious offering. It can be scaled down, like performed by a Fae for his specific family to heal an illness, or it can be massive.
Like a town-wide event.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
town-wide event led by the Fawn and the high religious leaders to ensure the prosperity of the entire community. Let's look at how it functions as a preparation for the hunting season.
Right, because hunting isn't just a weekend hobby there. It's a vital source of protein and economic stability.
Absolutely. Before the men set out, they don't just sharpen their spears and hope for the best. They gather at a designated sacred location.
Like where?
In the town of Mtumba, the text mentions specific sites like Ndapnangong or the Terrier, which is this towering, culturally significant boulder near the palace.
Okay, so they gather at the boulder. Then what happens?
The ritual involves the sacrifice of a fowl, and the blood of that fowl is deliberately spread onto the physical tools of survival. The hunting spears, the agricultural hoes.
Oh, wow, so they are physically blessing the tools.
Yes. They bless a special palm wine, they drink from it collectively to signify unity, and they call upon the gods and their ancestors to bless the land.
To grant them a bountiful hunt and protect them from injury.
Exactly. It's an economic planning meeting, a community bonding event, and a high religious sacrament, all happening simultaneously.
That is just incredible. But of course, life happens, right? The hunt fails, the crops blight, or someone in the family falls inexplicably ill.
Right. And when that harmony shatters, they don't just look for a biological cause.
They look for a spiritual and social rupture, and that is where the Nuseng comes in.
The Nuseng is the traditional diviner. They're basically the ultimate diagnostician of the society.
Right, because when you visit a Western doctor with a stomachache, they look for bacteria or an ulcer.
But when you visit a New Heng with a sudden severe illness, they are looking for the social friction that opened the door to that illness in the first place.
And they use specific tools for this, right? Like the nonjo.
Yes, the New Hem, which are carefully prepared peelings from a kola nut. The diviner casts these peelings onto the ground and meticulously interprets their positioning.
Like how they overlap, which way they face, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And they aren't just reading random shapes, they're reading the unseen social currents of the community.
Ah. Like, have you been fighting with your brother? Did you disrespect an elder?
Did someone curse you out of jealousy? The divination process is essentially a highly sophisticated form of social analysis.
So the new hang is reading the health of the community's interpersonal relationships to find out exactly where the social contract was violated.
That's exactly it.
So if we understand that the sheer physical and social survival of the community depends entirely on this interconnected spiritual leadership, we can start to grasp why disruptions to this harmony are treated as existential threats.
They are taken incredibly seriously.
Which naturally leads us to the massive, glaring inadequacy of the English word witchcraft to describe what happens when things go wrong.
Yes. The term witchcraft in English is just suffocatingly burdened by European history.
Completely. The moment you hear the word, your brain just conjures images of the Salem witch trials.
Right. Women burned at the stake, broomsticks, cauldrons, literal pacts with a Christian devil.
It's unavoidable.
It is. And to take that incredibly specific, historically loaded European concept and slap it onto African belief systems is, well, as the anthropologist Malcolm Crick famously pointed out, it is complete semantic nonsense.
Semantic nonsense. I love that phrase.
It's accurate. It violently strips away all the nuanced, localized, moral complexities of the culture you're trying to study.
It's like trying to describe a complex smartphone by calling it a telegraph. It's not just inaccurate, it actively prevents you from understanding how the thing actually works.
That's a great way to put it.
So we need to throw the word witchcraft out the window for a moment and learn the actual vocabulary of power, the Wimbum use.
Which is so much more precise.
Bomba's text categorizes this power into 3 distinct concepts. We have bufi, bri, and tifu. Let's start at the seemingly lighter end of the spectrum with bufi.
Okay, Pui.
This is fascinating to me because bufi is generally viewed as a completely neutral or even a highly positive skill.
Right. Bui is the capacity to perform extraordinary, spectacular feats. It is an innate power, a kind of exceptionalism, but it is entirely devoid of inherent malice.
The text provides a beautiful real-world example of this elder in Timba named Simon Enfor.
Simon Enfor, yes.
Reading about him was incredible. He just sounds like the ultimate community pillar, a guy who excels at everything he touches.
He is a deeply revered figure. He doesn't hold the absolute highest royal titles, but his social capital is just immense.
What does he actually do?
Well, he serves as a spokesperson for the fun. He meticulously inspects the meat at the local slaughterhouse to ensure public health.
So he's like a health inspector, too.
Exactly. He organizes the sanitation of the town. But where his bui truly manifests is in his role directing the ceremonial masks for the Norong.
And the Morong is a closed, powerful, regulatory society within the town, right?
Yes, it is.
The descriptions of these masked performances are just wild. When Simon Enfor is directing them, the people say the masks perform spectacularly, like they leap to the roofs of houses.
They move with a speed and agility that seems to defy the normal laws of physics.
But here is the vital distinction. No one in Tumba points at Simon Enfor and calls him a witch in a derogatory or fearful way.
Quite the opposite. The community absolutely adores him.
The sources mention that the women of his quarter literally compose and sing songs praising him,
saying he shines like a bright lamp for the town. He possesses bui, this extraordinary power, and he channels it entirely into the moral and social well-being of his community.
Let me throw an analogy at you because I want to make sure we and the listener really grasp this concept.
Go for it.
So if bui is just an extraordinary, almost miraculous level of skill, is calling an incredible athlete like, say, Michael Jordan in his prime, or a revolutionary tech genius, a wizard in English, actually a pretty accurate parallel.
It is a surprisingly accurate parallel, yeah.
Because we use supernatural metaphors to describe extreme talent all the time.
We do. When a human being performs a task so flawlessly, so far beyond the baseline of normal human capability that we just can't comprehend the mechanics of it, we instinctively reach for supernatural vocabulary.
Right. We say a musician played like a demon, or a coder is a tech wizard.
Exactly. For the Wimbum, bui is that exact recognition of transcendent skill, but formalized within their cultural vocabulary as a specific type of harnessed power.
Okay, so that's the positive end. Let's move one step up the scale of complexity to bri.
Bri introduces friction. It recurs to a more mischievous, unpredictable, or malevolent character, and the power that character wields.
So it's disruptive.
It is disruptive power. For example, it might describe someone who uses hidden knowledge to conjure a sudden, localized rainstorm specifically to ruin a neighbor's outdoor celebration.
Wow, just pure sabotage.
Exactly, an act of deliberate sabotage.
But the text also notes a lighter kind of conversational use of the word too, right? Like you might use it jokingly among friends if someone pulls a prank on you or just beats you handily at a game.
Yes, it definitely has that colloquial flexibility. However, we cannot underestimate brie because it can rapidly scale up to describe the most severe moral and social violations imaginable.
How severe are we talking?
Well, the anthropologist Phyllis Caberry, who did extensive fieldwork with the neighboring Nenso people, documented how they use a very similar concept to describe the act of incest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They referred to incest as the witchcraft of the sun.
Witchcraft of the sun. That is just such a haunting and striking phrase. Why of the sun?
Because incest is a heinous, community-shattering violation of the deepest social taboos, but it doesn't occur in the hidden, invisible, occult realm.
It happens in the physical world.
Right, in the daylight, among living bodies. It is a terrifying distortion of natural order happening right out in the open.
That makes perfect sense.
It proves that these terms, buoy and brie, they aren't just fantastical magic systems like in a fantasy novel. They are profound epistemological categories for classifying human behavior, intent, and morality.
That distinction really prepares us for the deepest, most complex, and honestly most dangerous term in this entire ecosystem, and that is tifu.
Tifu is the conceptual core of this entire deep dive.
Let's break down the word itself.
The linguistic root of the word literally translates to night or darkness. In everyday conversation, a Wimbum speaker might use the word tifu simply to say, night has fallen.
But when used as a noun to describe a conceptual power.
Then tifu represents an effective, secret nocturnal knowledge.
And let's clarify how someone gets it, because it's not like you can just go buy a book on it, and it's not strictly a royal bloodline thing either, right?
No, it is deeply complex. It is generally understood to be innate. You cannot simply walk into a marketplace and purchase tifu.
Right.
Furthermore, it is not strictly hereditary in the sense that a father with tifu will automatically pass it to his son. It's an internal capacity, a specific way of knowing and interacting with the invisible architecture of the world.
And having it isn't inherently a crime.
No, not at all. Having tifu is like having a loaded weapon or a very powerful prescription drug.
Right. The tool itself isn't evil.
Exactly. The possession of it is just a fact of nature. The intent behind its application is what society actually judges.
And because tifu is the primary engine behind the most intense societal frictions and fears, we have to examine its three distinct faces to understand how it operates on the ground.
Yes, the three faces of tifu. We have tifu yibi, tifu yevu, and tifu jar.
Let's start with the one that absolutely keeps people awake at night. Tifu yibi. This is the destructive, consuming, just terrifying aspect.
Tifu yibi is the nightmare scenario. It is the deeply held belief that certain practitioners use their secret knowledge to literally or metaphorically eat human flesh.
It's just so visceral.
It is. And the truly chilling, psychologically devastating part of this belief system is the targeting mechanism.
Right, because you can't just use tifu yibi to attack a random stranger in the next town, can you?
No. The foundational rule of traditional tifu yibi is that practitioners must offer up their own consanguineal relatives, their own flesh and blood kin, to a secret occult association.
The text refers to this occult association as a ngwa. Now, in normal, everyday Wimbum society, a guo is just a financial savings group, right?
That's right.
Like a mutual aid society or a credit union where everyone chips in a bit of money each month, and they take turns collecting the payout to buy a new roof or pay school fees.
You've hit on the exact horror of it. Tifu yibi takes the most vital trust-based institution of community survival, the mutual aid group, and completely inverts it into a chamber of horrors. In the occult ngong, the currency isn't cash. It is human life.
Unbelievable.
The practitioners gather invisibly, and they are expected to contribute the lives of their nieces, nephews, or siblings to be spiritually killed and distributed among the coven to be eaten.
And this grants them prolonged life or power.
Exactly. It is the ultimate betrayal of the family unit.
And there is a mechanism within this that truly blew my mind when I was reading. It's something called opening eyes. It's this idea that an innocent person can be tricked into this cannibalistic economy.
It is a mechanism of forced complicity, and it's a source of immense social paranoia.
How does it work?
Well, the belief is that a practitioner with tifu yibi can disguise human flesh as normal, everyday food, perhaps a piece of cooked meat offered at a gathering.
Slipping it onto a plate.
Right. If you, an innocent person, consume that meat, your eyes are open to the occult world. You are instantly transformed into a practitioner.
Without even consenting to it.
Exactly. But far worse, because you have consumed flesh provided by the nyongo, you are now in their debt.
Oh no, so you owe them.
You owe them a life from your own family to balance the ledger.
Which brings us to a specific, incredibly tense, real-world case study from the text involving a man in Tumba named Shea Reba.
Yes, the Shea Reba case.
He was a prominent figure, but he was publicly accused by several youths in the town of secretly feeding them human flesh to initiate them.
It was a massive crisis for the town. The youths realized, or at least they believed they realized, what they had eaten.
And they knew they were caught in this occult debt trap.
Right. They believed they would be forced to sacrifice their own families. The tension in the town was just palpable.
But the community didn't resort to mob violence. And they didn't execute him.
No, they didn't.
Instead, they utilized an incredibly specific legal and spiritual mechanism to resolve it. Let's really dig into the how and the why of the cleansing ritual they performed.
The town elders intervened because they had to stop the cycle of occult violence before it manifested in actual physical deaths. So they orchestrated a public cleansing ritual centered around a principle of substitution. The youths owed a debt of flesh. To cancel that debt without a human dying, the elders brought forward a fowl, a chicken.
Now, why a fowl? For you listening, you might wonder why they couldn't just have Shea Reba apologize or, I don't know, pay a fine in cash. Why does it have to be an animal?
Because in this specific spiritual economy, a life was promised. So a life must be given.
I see.
Cash simply cannot balance a ledger that is in blood. The fowl serves as a biological living substitute. Its life force, its blood, is deemed sufficient to reset the spiritual scales.
So what actually happens during the ritual?
During the ritual, the elders literally struck the accused, Shea Reba, with the live fowl. This physical act finalized the transaction.
Wow.
The life of the fowl paid the debt of the youths, effectively closing their eyes to the occult world. It severed their forced tie to the Tifu Yibi network and restored them to normal society.
It is an astoundingly complex legal maneuver. It's basically a social mechanism for conflict resolution and trauma processing, just manifesting as an occult ritual.
That is exactly what it is.
Okay, so that is the dark side of Tifu. Let's pivot to the second face. Tifu Yebu. And this is where the nuance really shines, because Tifu Yebu is entirely positive.
Yes, it literally translates to the power to see evil.
The power to see evil.
Tifu Yebu is basically the immune system of the community. We spoke earlier about the fawn, the town chief.
Right.
When a new fawn is installed, he doesn't just put on a crown and sit on a throne. He undergoes intense, secret rituals designed specifically to grant him a second pair of eyes.
Meaning he gets Tifu Yebu.
Exactly. The fawn must possess Tifu Yebu. If he cannot perceive the invisible, nocturnal threats facing his town, if he can't see the Tifu Yibi practitioners plotting in the dark, he is entirely useless as a protector.
And it's not just the fawn who uses this, right? The healers we discussed earlier, the new Yushep, and the diviners, the new Sang.
Yes, they rely entirely on Tifu Yebu to accurately diagnose illnesses and prescribe cures.
The text also details a closed, highly secretive society called Nsingong.
The Rensingong are absolutely vital. They operate as the spiritual border patrol of the town.
A spiritual border patrol. I love that.
They utilize their Tifu Yebu to identify vulnerabilities in the town's perimeter, and they place highly potent protective medicines at the crossroads and borders to physically and spiritually block evil forces from entering the community.
So having Tifu really isn't the problem at all. It's the intent. The fawn using Tifu Yebu is an institutional check against the rogue elements using Tifu Yibi.
Exactly. It's a localized system of checks and balances, just fought on a spiritual plane.
But I have to push back on this a little bit because it feels incredibly precarious to me.
How so?
Well, if the fawn has this immense, terrifying power to see and fight occult forces, isn't he essentially wielding the exact same weapon as the people he's fighting?
That is the risk, yes.
Let me use an analogy. It's like a major corporation hiring a notorious, incredibly skilled hacker to run their cybersecurity. You want them on the wall defending the network, sure, because they know all the tricks.
Right.
But what happens if the fawn decides to go rogue? What if he uses that ultimate power to enrich himself instead of protecting the town?
Your hacker analogy is spot on. And the Wimbum are acutely historically aware of that exact vulnerability.
Have they ever had to deal with it?
Oh, yes. The text recounts a deeply troubling historical instance where a ruling Fawn was actually accused by his own people of weaponizing his powers.
Wow. What did he do?
He was suspected of practicing Tifu Yibi and was held responsible for a series of tragic, inexplicable deaths among the princes and princesses of his own royal lineage.
That is the ultimate betrayal, the protector becoming the predator. How did the community respond to that?
They didn't cower, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
The elders and the regulatory societies convened massive, incredibly tense sessions at the palace to confront him.
To his face.
Yes. And according to the historical accounts passed down, under the sheer weight of the community's investigation, the Fawn actually confessed to using negative Tifu.
He confessed.
He did, and the people immediately took action to depose him, to completely strip him of his royal authority.
But then the colonial authorities stepped in.
Yes, unfortunately. The local colonial district administration, operating under British indirect rule at the time, intervened. They looked at their legal code and declared that it was technically unlawful for the populace to depose a recognized traditional ruler.
Wow.
But the Wimbum community's philosophical and moral argument remained crystal clear. If a leader, no matter how divinely appointed, uses Tifu to consume his own people, he completely forfeits his mandate to rule.
So status and royalty do not provide a shield against the ethical demands of the community.
Not at all.
That is a staggering assertion of democratic accountability. And it predates a lot of modern political theory.
It really does.
Okay, we need to look at the third and final face of traditional Tifu. This is Tifu jar. Now, this one seems a bit more petty on the surface, but it is deeply destructive.
It is essentially driven by pure, unadulterated jealousy.
Right.
Tifu jar is the weaponization of envy. It is generally not fatal, unlike Tifu Yibi, but it is designed to cause severe discomfort, chronic illness, or the destruction of physical property.
It targets the things that make life comfortable and prestigious.
Exactly.
Bomba's text provides an incredibly vivid, almost darkly comedic example of this, involving an extended family head who used Tifu jar to make his own elite wealthy relative chronically sick.
Yes.
And the motive behind it, the elite relative wouldn't buy him a car.
To a Western ear, using dark magic to curse someone over a Honda Civic sounds absolutely absurd.
It sounds totally nuts.
But you have to look deeper. It speaks volumes about the intense pressure cooker expectations of wealth distribution in these kin networks. The Fae felt that the entire extended family had pooled their resources to support this young man's education, which allowed him to rise to an elite civil service position.
Okay, so they invested in him.
Exactly. Therefore, the Fae, as the head of the family, felt he was owed the prestige and utility of a vehicle as a return on the family's investment.
And when the elite relative said no?
When he claimed he didn't have the disposable income to buy a car at that moment, the Fae felt deeply disrespected and slighted. He later confessed to using Tifu jar to inflict a persistent, nagging illness on the relative as punishment.
Wow. It's aggressive wealth redistribution.
Yeah.
And there's a subcategory of this called new way, right? Which translates roughly to causing nightmares to collect a debt.
Yes, Yunwei.
It's essentially an occult collection agency. You owe someone money, you refuse to pay, and suddenly you are plagued by terrifying, sleep-depriving night terrors.
It is a spiritual warning shot across the bow saying, pay your debts or the consequences will escalate.
When formal legal avenues, like taking someone to small claims court, are unavailable, too expensive, or just socially inappropriate between family members, nyongo serves as a powerful psychological mechanism for enforcing financial obligations.
Yeah, it's exactly how it functions.
So we've established the traditional boundaries here. Traditional Tifu, for all its terrifying aspects, operates within strict rules. It is generally confined within the kinship network, it is counterbalanced by the Fawn and the diviners, and it is ultimately tied to enforcing social obligations and community balance.
Right.
But the world doesn't stand still. What happens to this delicate system of accountability when the post-colonial capitalist state arrives?
That changes everything.
Right, when people start moving away to cities, accumulating massive individual cash wealth, and operating completely outside of the traditional family structure.
That collision between traditional accountability and modern capitalism forces the discourse of Tifu to mutate.
To mutate.
Yes. As Cameroon modernized rapidly, as urban centers exploded, as a cash-based economy replaced barter and subsistence farming capitalist, accumulation allowed individuals to hoard wealth independently.
And the old rules just didn't apply anymore.
The traditional vocabulary of Tifu simply wasn't sufficient to explain the massive glaring disparities in wealth that were suddenly appearing. The old rules of family-bound Tifu didn't apply to a distant corporate boss or a corrupt government official.
So what did the Wimbum do?
They adapted. They appropriated terrifying new vocabulary from the coastal regions of Cameroon. They adopted the concepts of nyongo and kupi.
And these new concepts are absolute nightmare fuel. They represent a viral mutation of Tifu. Unlike traditional Tifu, nyongo and kupa are entirely transgressive.
They've broken free from the kinship rules.
You don't have to target your own family anymore.
Right. Traditional Tifu Yibi was a horrifying betrayal, but it was at least contained within the bloodline. Nyongo completely shatters those boundaries.
Practitioners of nyongo are believed to be utterly indiscriminate, right?
Yes. The prevalent fear is that a practitioner will intentionally drop money, like a cursed coin or a high-value bill on the ground, in a busy public place, like a market or a crossroads.
Just leave it there as bait.
Exactly as bait. Anyone, a total stranger, an innocent child walking to school who picks up that money, instantly becomes a victim of the nyongo practitioner.
And the fate of those victims is arguably worse than death. They aren't just killed and eaten in the traditional sense. They are said to be turned into zombie-like laborers.
The horrifying thought.
They are spirited away from their physical lives, presumed dead by their families, but their souls are actually enslaved in the occult realm to work on massive, invisible plantations.
Often rumored to be located on the legendary Mount Coop in the southwest province.
And they toil endlessly in the dark to generate massive cash wealth for the practitioner.
Let's strip away the supernatural language for a moment and look at this through a hard sociological lens. What you are describing is a direct, visceral, incredibly sophisticated critique of post-colonial capitalism and alienated labor.
Because it's completely unnatural to them.
Think about traditional subsistence farming. In that system, wealth is visible, it's tangible, and communal. You see the crops growing in the dirt, you see the cattle grazing.
You know exactly how much work went into it, and the community shares the yield.
Exactly. But in the modern capitalist economy, an urban elite, a civil servant, or a corrupt cooperative union leader suddenly acquires a massive mansion and luxury cars overnight.
While the rural farmers break their backs and remain in poverty.
To the communal mindset, this rapid, invisible, individual accumulation of wealth feels deeply unnatural and fundamentally violent.
This is where my mind was completely blown reading the sources. Nyongo is essentially the ultimate metaphor for exploitative capitalism.
It really is.
Karl Marx famously wrote about capitalism extracting surplus labor value from the worker, paying them less than the value they produce and pocketing the difference. But the Wimbum look at the extreme end of that system and say, no, it's worse than that. Nyongo literally extracts the worker's life force.
The worker is consumed entirely.
Is this discourse actually a highly sophisticated, localized critique of wealth inequality masquerading as a supernatural panic?
The vast majority of modern anthropologists and sociologists would argue exactly that. It perfectly articulates the profound alienation of modern labor.
Because they're completely disconnected.
When a factory worker or a low-level corporate employee commutes to work, their labor is entirely disconnected from their own community's survival. They're exhausting their bodies and minds to generate invisible wealth for a distant, faceless elite.
Shareholders they will never, ever meet.
The myths of nyongo and coup give voice to the grotesque nature of hoarding wealth in a society that is fundamentally wired to value communal distribution. It basically says the only way one man can get this rich this fast is if he's literally bleeding his neighbors dry.
The source material gives a tragic, real-world example of how this economic panic manifests into actual violence, and it centers around a school headmaster in the town of Ndu. To set the scene, being a headmaster at that time made you a prominent, salaried civil servant. You had a level of financial stability and social status that the average farmer did not have.
Yes, he represented the educated, salaried elite. And then a horrifically tragic event occurred. A fatal traffic accident involving a vehicle transporting several school children.
Just an awful, mundane tragedy of modern infrastructure.
But the community, steeped in the anxieties of nyongo and economic disparity, could not process the sudden, violent loss of innocent life as mere chance or bad luck.
So the rumors exploded.
They spread like wildfire. The community began whispering and then shouting that the headmaster hadn't just been unlucky. They accused him of intentionally orchestrating the accident to sacrifice those innocent children to a coup society.
To pay off his occult debts.
Exactly. The narrative was that he had accumulated massive occult debts to secure his wealth and his prominent position, and the children were the blood payment required by his dark creditors.
And the reaction from the town was absolute fury. They didn't just gossip. Diviners were brought in, and they claimed to have uncovered a pot of highly potent occult objects linked to the headmaster.
It escalated incredibly fast.
The town rioted. The anger and the fear were so intense, so visceral, that the local divisional officer, the government authority, had to deploy forces to intervene.
Just to keep order.
The school was completely shut down, and the headmaster had to be permanently relocated to another town just to save his life from the mob.
It highlights the extreme, volatile social tension that exists in these transitional economies. When traditional safety nets fail, when wealth seems to operate by invisible, exploitative, and unfair rules, the community reaches for the language of nyongo to identify, isolate, and violently attack the perceived source of that exploitation.
It is an expression of profound economic powerlessness. So, if we look at everything we've just discussed, if we view the complex rules of Tifu and the terrifying capitalist critiques of nyongo not as primitive superstition, but as sophisticated socioeconomic frameworks and moral philosophies, it completely shatters how early Western anthropologists tried and failed to study these communities.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Which leads us into one of the most fascinating academic battles of the 20th century, the great rationality debate. Ultimately, the question is, who gets to decide what makes sense?
This debate is a massive, sprawling philosophical battleground that has raged for decades. For a very long time, Western observers, missionaries, and academics judged African belief systems against a single, unyielding benchmark.
Western empirical science.
Exactly. And the quintessential textbook example of this colonial mindset is the work of E. Evans Pritchard, a highly influential British anthropologist operating during the height of the colonial era.
Evans Pritchard is famous for his work with the Azande people, specifically his meticulous documentation of their poison oracle known as Benj.
The Benj oracle, yes.
Can you explain how the Benj oracle actually works?
The Benj oracle is a central decision-making tool for the Azande. When faced with a crisis, say someone is sick or a crime has been committed and they suspect witchcraft, they take a specially prepared poison and administer a specific dose to a fowl.
The chicken again.
Yes. They then ask the oracle a yes or no question. Is this man responsible for the sickness? If the fowl survives the poison, it means one answer. If the fowl dies, it means the opposite.
It's essentially a spiritual lie detector test relying on toxicology.
Correct. Now, Evans Pritchard lived with them, he respected them to a degree, and he documented this process with incredible detail. But his underlying conclusion, written for his academic peers in Europe, was essentially this. The Azande are intelligent people, but this specific practice is fundamentally illogical.
Because it doesn't match science.
Right. He said it does not correspond to objective scientific reality. Poison kills based on dosage and biology, not based on the guilt or innocence of a suspect.
Which, okay, biologically is true.
But he viewed their entire system of reasoning as flawed because he was using Western scientific epistemology as the sole, universal standard of human rationality.
He was grading their spiritual and legal system using a chemistry rubric.
Precisely.
But then, a few decades later, you have Peter Winch, a British philosopher, who steps into the arena and basically throws a wrench into Evans Pritchard's entire worldview. Winch says, hold on, you're measuring apples with a ruler designed for oranges.
Winch delivered a devastating critique. He argued forcefully for a concept known as contextualism. Winch stated that standards of rationality are not floating out in the ether. They are deeply bound to specific societies and their unique forms of life.
Forms of life.
Yes.
Yes.
You cannot judge the Azande poison oracle by the strict standards of a London chemistry lab because the oracle isn't trying to be chemistry. It is a complex social mechanism designed to navigate intense community anxiety, to make difficult consensus-driven decisions, and to maintain social cohesion without tearing the village apart.
So it works for them.
Within the context of Azande's social needs, the oracle functions perfectly. Therefore, within its own context, it is perfectly rational.
But this debate gets even trickier, right? Because if we follow Winch all the way, if we just say everything is relative to its own culture, we hit a philosophical wall. We end up in a place where we can't critique anything at all.
Which is why the American philosopher Richard Bernstein becomes so crucial to this conversation. Bernstein recognized that both extremes were dangerous.
Objectivism and relativism.
Right. He wanted to move beyond the rigid, arrogant binary of objectivism, the colonial idea that there is only one universal truth and the West owns it, and relativism, the paralyzing idea that everything is just subjective opinion and therefore beyond critique.
So what was his solution? How did he bridge that gap?
Bernstein proposed the concept of dialogical communities. He argued that human beings shouldn't be looking for some sterile mathematical algorithm to prove what is definitively rational. Instead, we should look at how communities actually function.
Through conversation and debate.
Communities use practical judgment, persuasion, debate, and dialogue to interpret their reality and solve their unique problems. Rationality isn't a fixed state. It is an ongoing dialogue.
And we absolutely cannot talk about how the West views African rationality without bringing in the towering intellect of V.Y. Mudimbe and his groundbreaking paradigm-shifting book, The Invention of Africa.
Mudimbe's work is a devastating surgical critique of Western epistemology. He argues that the entire Western academic discourse, anthropology, history, literature, literally constructed the idea of the savage or primitive African other.
It was intentional.
It wasn't just a series of innocent scientific mistakes. It was a deliberate ideological project. By framing African thought as irrational, mythic, and childish, the West created a moral justification for imposing its own rational order.
It provided the intellectual cover for brutal colonialism, mass resource extraction, and total political marginalization.
Exactly.
If we connect Mudimbe and Bernstein to the bigger picture of what we are doing today, the question we should be asking as outsiders isn't whether Tifu or Nyongo can be proven under a microscope in a laboratory.
That is a useless colonial question.
The question we should be asking is, what profound meaning, what moral order, and what mechanisms of survival is the Wimbum community creating through this specific discourse?
Precisely. We have to stop asking if it's scientifically real in a Western sense and start analyzing how it functions to regulate greedy behavior, how it allows a community to process the paralyzing grief of a lost child, and how it provides a language to resist modern economic exploitation.
Okay, but I have to challenge this, because this is where the academic theory hits the hard reality of human suffering.
It's complicated, yes.
If we go full contextualist, if we just sit back in our armchairs and say, well, that's their dialogical community at work, it's their form of life, aren't we willfully ignoring the actual physical victims of the system?
We can't ignore them now.
Think about the real human beings we've talked about today. Think about the woman mentioned in Bongba's text who was violently forced into permanent exile from her home and family because she was accused of Tifu. Or think about the school headmaster in Indu who was nearly beaten to death by a terrified mob.
Right.
We cannot just shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's their contextual rationality. How do we, or how does Bongba critique the harm, the very real violence of these accusations, without acting like arrogant colonial imperialists imposing Western science from on high?
That is the ultimate tightrope walk. It is the most difficult and vital question of this entire deep dive. How do you critique profound violence without becoming a colonizer in your critique?
Exactly.
That exact agonizing tension is exactly why Elias Gafon Bongba, the author of our source material, realizes that traditional anthropology isn't enough. He has to turn somewhere else to find a moral compass that isn't tainted by colonialism.
And he finds it in the radical, uncompromising ethics of the French-Lithuanian philosopher Emmanuel Levinas.
Yes, Levinas is key here.
Let's get into Levinas, because his work is notoriously dense. His masterwork is called Totality and Infinity, published in 1961. And in it, he basically launches an all-out assault against the entire history of Western philosophy, which he calls ontology.
He does.
For the listener who hasn't taken a graduate-level philosophy seminar, can you bring that down? Okay, let's ELI5 this. What does he mean by ontology, and why does he equate it to totality?
Let's ground it in an everyday experience. Imagine you meet a stranger at a party. What does your brain immediately do?
It starts categorizing them.
Exactly. You look at their clothes, listen to their accent, ask what they do for a living. You might say, they are millennial, they work in tech, they probably hold these political views.
Right, you put them in a box so you can understand them quickly.
In Western philosophy, ontology is the study of being. But Levinas argues that this entire tradition has always been obsessed with comprehension, possession, and intellectual control. When we try to know something or someone, we violently force them into our own pre-existing categories.
We strip away their uniqueness.
We strip away their unique, infinite difference to turn them into something familiar and safe. Levinas calls this reducing the other to the same.
Reducing the other to the same.
This is what he means by totality.
Right.
It's the intellectual attempt to totalize the world, to possess it, to make it all fit neatly into your own worldview. And Levinas argues profoundly that this intellectual totalization always, inevitably, leads to physical violence, subjugation, and war.
Because if I can reduce you to a category, I can justify dominating you.
Exactly.
So instead of totality, Levinas argues for the concept of infinity.
Yes. Infinity is the radical countermeasure. It is the realization that the human other, the actual breathing person sitting across from you, is radically separate from you. They are transcendent.
They can't be put in a box.
They possess an internal universe that you can never, ever fully comprehend, possess, or consume. Levinas argues that the very existence of the other, specifically what he calls the face of the other, makes a non-negotiable ethical demand on you.
And what is that demand?
It cries out, "You shall not kill me. You shall not consume me. You shall not reduce me to your categories."
Okay, this is beautiful, heavy European philosophy written in the aftermath of World War II. How on earth does this connect to the Wimbum people in the agricultural highlands of Cameroon?
It connects seamlessly through the profound Wimbum concepts of personhood. The text highlights a specific, beautiful Limbum expression, fo niwe. It translates to, pride exists only in a person.
I loved this section of the book because it completely annihilates the tired Western stereotype that African societies are just these monolithic communitarian hives where the individual doesn't matter.
Where everyone is just a cog in the tribal machine.
Right.
That stereotype is colonial nonsense. The Wimbum fiercely, structurally honor the sanctity of the individual. Think about the social mechanisms they have in place. They will literally stop the bustling, vital economic engine of the town market to publicly announce protections for a vulnerable stranger who has just moved to town.
They stop the whole market.
Yes. They have complex social rules to override strict bride wealth requirements so that no individual, no matter how poor, is denied the fundamental human right to marry and build a life.
That's incredible.
And look at how they process grief. When an elderly person dies, there is mourning, but it is seen as a completed cycle. But when a young person dies, the grief is so intense, so paralyzing, that they describe it as a death that spoils the mouth.
Spoils the mouth.
It physically ruins the appetite for life because a singular, unrepeatable individual's potential was violently cut short. They value the singular human being intensely.
So what does this all mean when we take Levinas's ethics of the other and apply it directly to the fear of Tifu?
When we apply Levinas to Tifu, everything clicks into brilliant focus. The negative, destructive practice of Tifugi, the act of offering up your own relatives to an occult group to be spiritually killed, is the ultimate horrifying physical manifestation of Levinasian totalization.
Let me make sure I'm connecting these dots.
Yeah.
Levinas says Western philosophy is obsessed with metaphorically eating the world, turning everything and everyone into knowledge or resources that we can possess and control.
Yes.
And the Wimbum are saying that negative Tifu literally eats human beings.
Exactly.
Sinking your teeth into the flesh of your own family member or turning your innocent neighbor into a mindless zombie laborer on Mount Coop for a nyongo wealth cult is the absolute ultimate violation of the human face. It is an attempt to consume the infinite other entirely for the benefit of the same.
You've nailed it. They are describing the exact same profound ethical violation. They are just using different vocabularies. Levinas uses the dense language of European phenomenology.
And the Wimbum use the visceral, urgent language of occult power.
But the ethical core is identical. You cannot consume another human being for your own gain. It is the ultimate crime against existence.
So when the Wimbum community holds a cleansing ritual with a fowl, or when they take to the streets to protest a corrupt, hyper-wealthy union leader they accuse of couper, they are not acting out of some primitive irrationality that needs to be educated out of them.
Not at all. They are enacting a profound, urgent Levinasian ethical demand. They are demanding structural justice.
Protecting the vulnerable.
They are stepping up to forcefully protect the inviolable sanctity of the human other from being consumed by power, greed, and the crushing forces of capitalism.
Mm.
True justice, whether you are reading French philosophy or participating in a Wimbum town council, requires a face-to-face encounter where the victim's infinite transcendence actively limits the violent power of the aggressor.
That is an incredible, breathtaking synthesis. We have covered a truly immense amount of intellectual ground today.
We really have.
We started by unpacking the complex, nuanced moral vocabulary of the Wimbum, moving far beyond the useless baggage of the word witchcraft to understand bfui as miraculous, harnessed skill,
Brie as mischievous or transgressive disruption.
and tifu as an innate, potent secret knowledge.
We examine the terrifying viral evolution of that traditional discourse into the modern fears of nyongo and coup, revealing it as a highly sophisticated, visceral critique of post-colonial capitalist exploitation and the alienation of labor.
We navigated the thorny historical debates on rationality, rejecting the arrogant colonial urge to judge every culture by the rigid standards of Western empirical science, and instead looking at the contextual meaning and survival mechanics these beliefs hold for the community.
And finally, we landed on this profound, beautiful ethical framework, bridging African anthropology and Lebanese philosophy.
Realizing that the ultimate crime in absolutely any culture is consuming the humanity of another person.
It really serves as a humbling reminder that the way we judge and categorize other cultures often reveals far more about our own hidden anxieties and moral blind spots than it does about them.
That is so true.
Taking the time to understand Taifu isn't about memorizing obscure African folklore. It is about recognizing how human beings, universally, struggle desperately to articulate the bounds of power, the poison of jealousy, and the demand for justice in a world that is changing terrifyingly fast.
We've seen today how the Wimbum adapted the language of the occult nyongo and kupa to describe the invisible, life-draining, monstrous forces of modern capitalism. And it leaves you with a thought I want you to carry with you today.
I'm ready.
Think about your own life, your own job, your own economy. If a truly objective outside observer were to study our modern economic systems today, if they were to look past our sterile spreadsheets, our quarterly earnings reports, and our sanitized legal jargon, what perfectly legal, everyday business practices might they view as a socially accepted form of dark magic?
That's a chilling thought.
Where are human lives, perhaps even your own, being quietly, legally consumed right now to generate the invisible wealth of a distant elite?
It certainly makes you look at the architecture of our own society in a completely new and somewhat unsettling light.
It sure does. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.